Route 66, as most of you know, was a main route across a good share of the United States for many years, officially 1926 through 1977. It was designed as a route. Actually, it was going to go across the country. It's too long of a story to tell you the whole story, so I'll just hit some highlights. It was going to be named Route 60. And it was going to go the southern route and on across the United States. But a man named Cyrus Avery, who was a citizen of Oklahoma, and he was in the oil business, and he was also into public affairs, and he saw that having this new national route would be a really good thing to go across Oklahoma as far as tourism and the economics of the state in general. So Cyrus Avery, in recent decades, has been known as the father of Route 66 because he was instrumental with the different highway routes. And so he got it rerouted. It went across Oklahoma, hit St. Louis, and then up to Chicago. So obviously it did not go all the way across the United States. It reached from Chicago to Los Angeles. So the people out in the eastern states that still wanted a national road to come through, they thought that the 60 was a little too important of a number for this road. So they settled on 66. So I think it's got a better ring to it anyway. So that's how that happened. The states were almost in competition with each other to see who could get their paved route through the states first. And Illinois had a big advantage because it already had the industrial corridor between Chicago and St. Louis. So they used what we still call Old Route 4 as a major portion of it, and then they used some other sections as well, and then eventually started building other sections. One thing that always held true with Route 66 in Illinois is a prime example of that was as soon as they got all the signs up and they got it routed one way, then they changed it. So there's many different alignments throughout the 8 states that it goes through. Illinois' got several different sections, and they did that in Madison County as well. So I would be here the rest of the day explaining the different alignments and where they went and when they got changed. So we won't do that. We'll just hit some highlights, which are fun. So as far as Madison County, it came in alternately down from Staunton. It also came through by Williamson, Livingston, Warden, 2 different alignments. So I tried to cover in my Route 66 in Madison County book the different alignments and the different communities that it went through. The picture that's on the cover of the book, which you can just barely see, is a place that's no longer in existence. That was the Green Gables Tourist Court. At one time they had gas pumps, they had a little bitty sandwich shop, and they had tourist cabins. Some people might remember, I can remember when it was still there, it was about halfway between Edwardsville and Hamel on the west side of the road. It was begun in 1931 by a man named Harry Baumgartner, and it was his ambition to make this the best little tourist complex between St. Louis and Chicago. Well, it wasn't very big, so I think he had some pretty good aspirations, but he might have achieved that goal. But was not able to, about a dozen years later, he was unknown. I don't know if he was attempting to burn trash or what he was doing out in the yard, but he was starting a fire and he dumped kerosene or coal oil on it. And it flashed up and burned him all over his body. His wife found him and drove him up to the hospital in Litchfield, St. Francis Hospital, and but he died a couple days later. So his complex did not achieve the aspirations that he hoped for. So, little by little, the different buildings were torn down, and it's been all going now for a number of years. So that's what's on the cover. It was kind of an... So I tried to write my books as if they were an imaginary tour. All the pictures are in there in the order of how you would see them if you were driving by. So that was the idea. There's a couple images from Warden. Now these are gone. That's Frank and Harold's. And this is Neuron's cabins. And that's 66 right by there, and then the Illinois Railroad tracks behind. Those complexes are both gone. Those were somewhat south of the Warden Y, if any of you are familiar with that area. Hamel's proud of its Route 66 heritage. The Merrimack Caverns Barn, this is the one that was right across I-55 from the Lutheran Church with the neon cross. And a storm last year took this down. It was almost completely destroyed, and just a couple months ago, they finally came in and cleaned it up. It's gone. This is a tricky picture to see. This is an unidentified early Illinois State Trooper. The Illinois State Police kind of came into being in the early days of Route 66 through Illinois, and they were basically at that time, they were concerned with the load weights on the new roads. So that was sort of what they were patrolling at the time. This picture was taken at the main intersection in Hamel, and that's actually Casson's auto showroom, their auto business. And there's a picture there again of Casson's used car lot. I don't know why the whole picture is not showing. Mr. Casson's is in the middle, that's Albert, I believe. And the man on the left is Butch, his name escapes me. He was a mechanic. And on the right-hand side, out of view on this particular image, is Wilton Wrinkle. Do any of you know Rich's Rabbit Ranch up in Staunton? Okay. It's just across the line from Madison County, so I didn't include it in the book, but it's kind of a fun story. The couple that has Henry's Rabbit Ranch, Rich Henry and his wife Linda, and their parents were both involved in truck drivers and whatnot on Route 66 for many, many years in the old days, and that's one of their parents was the other person in that photo. Livingston had some kind of interesting things. This was the Sandrin gas station, right near where the Livingston High School was, which is now the Pink Elephant Antique Mall. That's Bike's auto repair shop. And this is the old Ken Don Motel and Restaurant on the day it burned down. Does anybody remember that being there? That burned down in the late 70s. It was Kenny and Don Ackerman, two brothers, and they took a little cafe that had been there for a number of years and built it up and added the motel and called it the Ken Don. And an interesting coincidence, I just learned recently that a gentleman that also serves on the Edwardsville Historic Preservation Commission, I had never put two and two together. His last name is Ackerman, and he was talking to me about this one day, and he said, Ken and Don were my father and my uncle, so it's a small world. Edwardsville's got quite a bit of Route 66 heritage because Route 66 came through the entire length of the town, where some towns, you know, it just sort of comes along one edge or whatever. So Edwardsville really had a lot of Route 66 sites. Unfortunately, there are a lot of them that are gone. This is the old Sights station. This is where Jerry's Muffler Shop is as you come into Edwardsville just before you make the turn onto Vandalia. That's gone. I'm sorry to report. That's Cathcart's Cafe. That's on a corner just after you make that turn onto Vandalia Street. That was he advertised that as the famous, Hamburger's famous Coast to Coast. And the place was jammed, everyone says, all the time because the teenagers liked it. Everybody went there after this, the sports games from high school. And the bus, the Greyhound and Trailways and all the different buses stopped there at different times on that corner. Here are some of the pictures. Okay, let's see that one. Let's do that one. That's the Texaco station that was on the corner where that new building is now, where the new chop house and the sushi place is. The Texaco is on that corner of Buchanan and Vandalia. And the main story that I get from this station is that one time country western singer Ferlin Husky, he's of course from generations back, was motoring through and stopped, and that was the big story from the Texaco station, that they waited on Ferlin Husky. That's the A&W in Edwardsville. There was a couple from Wisconsin that picked out Edwardsville in particular. They had a small cheese factory in Wisconsin, and they came to Edwardsville, and they had a really, really rough first season. They built their A&W on a parcel of ground that was in a residential neighborhood, and the residents didn't appreciate the commercial business coming in. And it was 114 degrees several days, I think just about like the summer we just had. The little store had no air conditioning, of course, at that time. And so they had a really rough time. But after a few years, it really became an integral part of Edwardsville social life. People went there after games, that sort of thing, had family parties there. And their biggest years were during the years of the Mississippi River Festival at SIUE, where people would go to the A&W to eat either before or go for a snack afterwards. Everybody's nodding. I remember Mississippi River Festival too. Always good times. This is Lee Gates Motel. They were out south of town. If you're in Edwardsville, if you're familiar with it, you go out south of town past the university entrance and out that way. This is long gone. At one time they had a motel and they had a little trailer park. And while the SIUE campus was being built, a lot of the construction workers lived out here in little temporary buildings and trailers, that sort of thing. And Mitchell, of course, if you come down the hill on 157, and you can get on 270, or you can take the road straight across, then you end up in Mitchell. Right after you get on that road, there's this really nifty sign. At one time, you could read it easily that it said Town and Country Motel, and the motel really only consisted of two little tiny double cabins, like two little duplex cabins was all there really was, but they called it a motel, the Town and Country. But as the place went out of business and the sign faded, you could begin to see that this was originally a sign from a car dealership somewhere. It was a Kaiser Fraser car dealership sign. So the outer layer of paint is just about gone. This photo was taken, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago. And I know the last time I drove by there a couple months ago, even more of the paint's gone. So it reads now clearly Kaiser Fraser. And the famous or infamous Luna Cafe in Mitchell, which actually predated Route 66. This was opened in 1923 or 1924, and Route 66 officially opened in 1926. The Luna has quite a reputation for always hosting characters of one kind or another, mainly gangsters and people fleeing from the law and all sorts of things. And the little cherry in the martini glass was always said to have been, how can I phrase this delicately? It was lit up, that part of the sign was lit up if gentlemen wished to visit ladies in the upstairs. So they had an official relighting of this sign, Illinois Route 66 Association, at the end of the motor tour in June. And the end of the motor tour was the relighting of the sign. So that was a big event. I was just over there, not in there, but I was just there a couple of weeks ago. There's a historical society in Indiana that has great old steam engines, steam trains. And they make an annual run into Missouri and back over to Indiana. And they even offered some short excursions over the St. Peter's area. I didn't get to go. I was tied up and didn't get to go that weekend, but I did manage to get over behind the Luna, where the railroad tracks are, the day that it came through, headed back to Indiana. And it was funny, I found my way back there. It was kind of not even a back road, it's just kind of a area with gravel alongside the railroad tracks. And I thought, oh wow, I'm going to be the only person back here. But I got back there, and there were about 6 or 8 photographers back there, and they're all railroad buffs. I was the only 66 buff, but a lot of railroad buffs. So, and they've got got my little bitty camera, and they've got cameras on stands and all kinds of equipment waiting to catch that shot as that train came by. And it got delayed because since it's not a train that's a normal run, they had to wait on an Amtrak, and I had to wait on a couple of freight trains. So anyway, we stood there and waited for about 2.5 hours, and it finally came through, and somebody was on a walkie-talkie, and they had all the advance information, and it was running at 40+ miles an hour, so everybody knew they'd probably get one shot. So I did get one shot, and it was actually pretty good, and I put it on my Route 66 in Madison County Facebook page, so it was fun to get the one shot of it. So that's my Luna story. Tell me if I'm running on too long here. That's the Bel Air Drive-In sign at Mitchell, and that's all that's left is the sign. There's a big parking lot and trucking areas, an industrial area now. And there's an assortment of motels left in Mitchell. Most of them are kind of, low rent little apartments. But the signs on some of them are still there, and the signs are so neat. Granite City doesn't exactly tout itself as a Route 66 town, but the earliest alignment of Route 66 in Madison County did go through Granite City. It was only 1926 to 1930. So there's not a whole lot left. It was kind of hard to actually track that down. That's the railroad track along Namioki Road, which was a portion of Route 66. There were several locations of that bake shop along Route 66. That's an old Sinclair station right near the steel mill. There's an old postcard of the steel mill. And in the book, there's lots more photos than this. There's 200+ photos in each of these books. And then Collinsville also had a kind of a little known Route 66 alignment. It came in, actually, it came in and onto the Beltline, and then down to Bluff Road and on down. So it joined the old Route 40 for a period of time. The way this is sitting on the computer, you're not seeing the whole image here, and I wish you could see it, but if you could see just to the right, this is the greatest little gas station. It's got an Art Deco tower, or it had an Art Deco tower, and the tower is just about taller than the building itself. Just a really sweet style little station, and it's got the crown glass globes on the pumps. And where this is, if you're familiar with Collinsville, if any of you know Ramon's Restaurant, they used this as a base for that. Eventually it became a restaurant, and then eventually Ramon's, and of course the tower is gone. But that's where this is, on that corner, because Route 66 came right on Bluff Road, turned, came down there, and went on out and south. Motel that was along there. Fairmont Racetrack. And this is just a shameless plug for my 2 books right here. And that was many thanks to, when you do a book like this, it's, people often ask me where you get the images, and the answer most of us that write for this company, our usual answer is anywhere you can, because the historical societies, the libraries, and there's very often private collectors that are so generous, and they'll let you reproduce. And some of them think it's very cool, to have their pictures or their collection in a book.